To welcome everyone to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, April 9, 2024, and I would like to open the meeting at 7:30. If we may please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Mr. Fitzer? Mr. Colber?
Here.
Mr. Kucera?
Here.
Mr. Nushai? Ms. Redmond?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Solomon?
Here.
Mr. Tinlin?
And so we have 6 that constitutes a quorum here. We need 5 for a quorum, and we have 6. We can do business tonight. Agenda item number 4 is approval of the agenda in front of us. Yes. Does anyone have any changes or additions that they make to the agenda? Seeing none, I will approve it as is. Agenda item number 5 is the approval of the regular meeting minutes from March 26, 2024. That's our last meeting.
Oh, sorry, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 26, 2024.
Support.
Motion support. Anybody else have any changes? I would like to make one change, one word. On the agenda item number 13, our legal update, the sentence reads, City Attorney Rinus Nushai was excused early, no report provided. I would like to take the word excused out and replace it with left early.
Or exited, left? One of those two?
Left. I support that.
He simply left. He was not excused. I don't know where the word excused came from.
Okay. We can make that amendment.
Okay. I'll be happy with that then. Can I have a roll call on that then?
On the amendment first, right?
You can just approve it as amended.
Okay.
He'll make the changes.
Yeah.
So can we have roll call to approve the minutes?
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Colber?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak about anything that is not on the current agenda? If you come to the microphone, give us your name and address. We'll give you about 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Nate Hara, 413 Park Drive, Clawson, Michigan. I am very excited about the PNC project. I'm looking forward to something nice being there, but I am opposing your recommendation to the council to approve it without a further concession. I have lived in Clawson for almost 15 years. Some of you have known that long here. And I think that's 15 years longer than the developer has lived here, paid taxes here. I think it's 15 years longer than Rennis and Joan have lived here, so far as I know. The governor, I've lived with my neighbors that time here. And if you are confident and happy in your decision to approve that recommendation, and you believe you made it in honesty and with confidence, that you have fully understood that the recklessness or the wisdom in deviating from our ordinances, then I'm happy that you voted yes, and I hope you know something I don't. But our ordinances have been in place and protected our quality of life here for decades, and I don't think it's easy to say that they are just wrong and to be overlooked. Please don't consider this recommendation because you've been led to believe it's not in it's not your job to critique it, or that you're a rubber stamp, or that you're not allowed to question things or to judge the balance of the benefits that such a PUD brings to the table versus the negatives and the disadvantages and the threats to our quality of life that it may bring along with it. It's absolutely your job to do those things, to question those things. And anybody who's paid by the city should support your questions, not denounce them or forbid you to ask them. It's up to you to protect our quality of life. And again, if you are confident it was the right thing to do, I will absolutely support that. But it should be you not them. I see great recklessness in having the balconies over the sidewalk. It violates ordinances in many ways. Setbacks is one of them. And having beer cans, as you say, Mr. Chairman, falling on people's heads is a clear threat. Skipping a traffic study, just completely skipping it and forcing a recommendation on your part was reckless. I don't think it was a smart idea to skip the traffic study that so obviously threatens the quality of life, not only to the residents that live there in Lincoln and Bowers, as well as the businesses that are trying to compete there. If you don't understand the ordinances because you're new or because you just don't understand them, I don't blame you. I didn't understand them when I first came here either. But that's a good reason to abstain from your vote, not to vote yes because other people are. It's absolutely honorable and legitimate to abstain if you don't know what you're voting on. I hope that you will consider the information that you're giving to council because they don't know it any better than you do. They're counting on you to know it better than they and to be the negotiator, to have the highest expectation you can for that development. And again, I look forward to it. But a lot of other developers are going to feel shortchanged, and there will be the perception that if you know the right people, you'll get one way of being treated, and if you don't, you'll be treated a different way. And that's really bad. It seeds corruption, and it doesn't make businesses feel confident in doing business here. So I hope you will consider this. I don't know that it changes anything. It seems to me the people who voted for it aren't even here. But I am so grateful for you volunteering to be here. It's a beautiful day out there. I know you'd rather be somewhere else. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public wishing to comment? Seeing none, I will then close public comment, and we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is a site plan review for 502 South Main Street. Mr. Tangieri, want to talk us through this?
Can get us started here. Right, so if 502 South Main Street doesn't ring a bell, CNC Bump Shop probably does. This is a site down on South Main at the corner of Nakota and South Main that has gone through a long period of non-occupancy and neglect. There was some contamination on the site at one point. A lot of that has been remediated. The state has actually sent a letter. Was that included, Nick? Did they get that?
It was not.
Okay. Yeah, the state actually did send a letter certifying the site as low risk at this point. So,
Not to jump in, Joe, but can you, just because I saw comments online and things, you talk about when that remediation was done and if there's any public documents supporting it or giving out the results?
Do you want me to provide that now or later after this?
Whatever works. I just want to make sure it gets addressed before I forget. Sorry.
I'll provide something.
okay, sure, go ahead.
And then I imagine
Sorry to derail you, Joe.
The applicant will be able to touch on it too.
Yeah.
Earlier this month, we received verification from PM Environmental, which was the environmental consulting company working with the applicant, who has completed the baseline analysis of that site, which is required for these type of sites that are deemed contaminated. And so in that analysis, the results showed that the soil is low risk, and I'm just going to read the email word for word. The low risk is based on the residual contaminant concentrations outlined in the BEA soil analytical table. They do not have a vapor intrusion or direct contact risk based on the concentrations, and the impacts that remain are limited to the area around the former underground fuel tanks. So essentially, there is no risk to the area based on what happened underground, and that the state is going to still be monitoring the site for the next year just to make sure that the work that goes on at the site does not affect it at all. But bottom line is that all the necessary steps were checked to make sure the site is buildable and usable and safe for the public to come and go as they please.
Cool. Thank you for that confirmation.
Yeah.
What was the contamination? Well, what,
It used to be a gas station.
Okay.
Yeah,
Really
yeah,
takes-
exactly,
takes the
fuel.
ground.
When they did they actually remediate anything? Did they haul off any contaminated soil, or what was the process?
Things were hauled off.
Yeah, so I want to say sometime in 2019, I'm not exactly sure the date. Roughly 2019, a fuel tank was removed from the ground without any type of permits being pulled. And so because it was pulled illegally, without any permits, the state of Michigan flagged it as a potential site that has contamination. And so in order for it to be built or anything like that, it needed to go through a review phase, which is what Darren and his team did go through to get that verification that there's not a risk to the area.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we actually have, there's two parcels here. They total about 8,000 square feet. It's owned BRD1 Business Renewal District. Site has a 4,360 square foot building, and there's some parking and driveway areas as well. It's accessed from the alley off Tacoma Street. Present, there's no parallel, or there's some parallel parking on Main Street, and this is gonna there's gonna be 5 parallel parking spaces out in front, and there's kind of like a old driveway section there, and we'll talk about what the plan is for that. It's bordered by single-family residential use to the west, commercial uses to the north and south, and multifamily east across Main Street. That's that little like kind of one-story multifamily building there. Under dimensional standards, we had a couple that we needed provided a little more information provided, and then the others are compliant. The renovation is to accommodate 3 tenant spaces, retail and/or office. The uses that we're looking here, that might include a retail bakery. One of the things that we're noting in the review is that the site plan checklist is filled out, but some of the required information wasn't included in the plans. We've given a list there of information that was missing. There was some discussion as to whether or not to hold this to a later agenda. The applicant did ask to move forward with discussion tonight, so we are moving forward with that, but be aware that there is some information that was missing. When we look at a site like this, there's always a bunch of nonconformities on it, and this site does have some. On sites such as this, when an improvement is proposed, our goal is always to bring the site further into compliance to the extent practical. On a site like this, it's generally necessary to strike a balance between bringing items into full compliance and accepting certain nonconformities as they are, or in a somewhat lessened state. Nonconformities are summarized in this paragraph. Those are discussed where the applicant proposes to address them or where there appear to be practical barriers to eliminating them. So there's no screen wall present. We have I'm calling it an unpaved parking lot. It is possibly a depaved parking lot in that the pavement is so degraded that it appears to be unpaved. Parking lot does not have the striping that would generally be required right now, and there's some other ordinance requirements that aren't met. So looking at parking, this is probably the toughest bit for this site. Parking for a retail or shopping center, I accidentally wrote shipping center there, it's shopping center, with multiple tenants is required at a rate of 1 space per 200 square feet of usable floor area, plus 1 space per 150 square feet of outdoor dining area. They do have a small outdoor seating area proposed on their plan. The outdoor seating area is 216 square feet, so 1 space is required for that. The fractional space is less than 0.5, so we discard it. The gross floor area of the building is 4,360 square feet. For commercial uses, we typically peg usable floor area at 70% of gross floor area, or 3,052 square feet. 15 spaces are required for that. The site is, of course, very physically constrained. There is no marked spaces currently. The applicant is showing 5 spaces in a rear lot plus 3 diagonal spaces along the alley. The rear corners of the vehicles in those spaces do look like they will jut into the alley slightly. The applicant also notes 3 spaces on Tacoma. Those aren't really necessarily marked, but there's space for that. And then 5 in front of the building on North Main. Our engineer did provide some comments on the position of that parking. On the plan, it's not aligned with the rest of the parking on Main Street. That will have to be adjusted to align those spaces with that parking so that you have a uniform row of parallel parking down Main Street. So all told, there are 16 spaces available on site or in the immediate vicinity of the property. Planning Commission may consider as a condition of site plan approval collective parking when the following circumstances appear to justify such a condition. The applicant has provided for parking on the site, but the requirements for the non-conforming structure, lot, or use under Chapter 34 of the Land Development Code cannot be met. The nature of the use may impose the need for greater flexibility in the application of parking requirements depending on the hours of operation. The applicant has demonstrated that there is or will be in place a plan for off-site parking for employees, staff, or independent contractors working in the structure. If a road separates the structure from the use from the collective parking area, there's a marked or identified pedestrian crossing area in close proximity to the site. A written agreement, which can include incentives to the servient property owner, approved by the city, has been entered into and agreed to be a condition of the site plan approval. Or finally, a number different than required may be allowed upon a sufficient showing that such a number is justified by recognized industry standards. So we have a little bit of leeway to deal with a site like this as far as parking is concerned. In this case, we've got on-street parking that goes up and down Main, and when you draw a 300-foot buffer around this site, I don't recall the exact number of spaces, but it was a fair number of spaces on the west side of the road.
Can I ask a question here? I thought you said that 15 were required, and they have 16?
That's right. They don't have 16 on site. They've got 16 on the site and then in the immediate area. So they're in pretty good shape.
Okay.
But I just want to make it clear that there are extra on-street spaces kind of in the area that could accommodate this site as well.
Okay, and how many, can you tell me again, how many were on the actual site?
On the actual site, not counting parking in the public right-of-way, you've got 8. So the
8.
other half are in public rights-of-way.
Okay,
So a few of those are on Tacoma itself, 3 of them, and then the other 5 are on Main Street.
but they didn't give a parking plan necessarily. That's something you guys,
No, they have that parking all noted on their plan.
okay.
Is it on Tacoma? Where is that? Where am I missing?
Immediately north of the building.
Isn't
So
that
leading up
Nakota?
to the stop sign there.
Dakota? Okay, I just want to,
Yeah.
because Tacoma's like a few
Oh,
streets
sorry,
up.
yeah, Nakota. I said
Okay.
Tacoma. Tacoma is a few streets away, yeah, sorry.
All right, no, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah,
Technically walk there.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, a bit of a-
yeah, so, yeah, sorry. Got my
No.
similar street names confused, thank you.
Just want to clarify, thank you.
So that's the situation with the parking. When we look at parking and layout and design, I did note that the vehicles in the diagonal spaces are going to protrude partially into that 20-foot alley. We are looking at, and this has been discussed with the applicant and the engineer, an easement agreement assuring cross-access for this property and the properties to the south. So there's a couple interesting situations going on here. The building immediately south, that's actually shares a wall with this building, has its own parking lot, and the maneuvering lane for the spaces between those two buildings is actually shared. So we need to make sure that someone can back out of one of those spaces or back out of one of the spaces on this property and use the maneuvering lane portion that's on the other property. And that's really what the easement agreement would cover, is that, yes, you can use this property to access this parking spaces on the other property.
Joe,
And-
would you be able to pull that up and kind of show it? I want to just make sure I'm understanding the,
Yeah, I could.
are you
I could
able
bring
to
that up.
share and like kind of walk us through that?
Sure. Let me bring up the drawings and sign into the meeting. Hang on one second.
And that would have to be amenable to the neighbor, correct?
Yes,
as
that's
well?
correct, although they can't use their parking spaces without it either, so
Oh, okay.
it kind of benefits everybody.
And was the access for loading and unloading discussed in that context of needing to possibly get to the back of the building with those overhangs, or no?
That is part of it, yeah. Hang on one second, let me get into the meeting here. These older sites that in many cases were developed before we even had a zoning ordinance come with their own special kinds of challenges, as I'm sure the applicant will attest when he is talking to you. All right. Okay, let's get this up here. So hopefully I've got the right document. No, it's not the right one. Just one second.
I believe that's the area right there that he's talking about.
That's the one.
The different building there.
I opened the printout plans.
And that's where the agreement's got to be made.
Oh, okay, so it's similar to the collision?
He probably pulled up the same thing.
Is that- There we go. Okay. Sorry. Just took a couple seconds to get to the right file. Yeah, so in the back, let me zoom right in on this. What you've got is this situation where the property line goes straight down the middle of this parking area. So you have a 24-foot maneuvering lane and 18-foot spaces, which is more than enough for our ordinance. But because when you back out of this space, you're necessarily going onto the other property, and same here, a mutual cross-access agreement is the thing that's going to protect that access in the future.
And will we, did they consider like staggering them in different ways so that someone can easily see, like, that they're not lined up exactly with each other, so they don't just, I don't know, is that a thing? If you stagger them, is it easier for you to be able to see if someone's backing out at the same time as you are, or is that?
I mean, it doesn't really make that much of a difference.
No? Okay.
But at any rate, they're showing spaces that meet their ordinance requirements, so we just need to make sure that they're all going to be usable on the part of both tenants, or both property users of both properties. The other thing that's kind of funky here is that you've got the 20-foot alley, and there's a dumpster at the end of that alley that is owned by Bayless Auto. And the applicant, this is a question that we asked in our letter, and the applicant included in their response that they're actually going to be entering an agreement with Bayless to use that dumpster mutually. So all three of these properties will be using that dumpster as their trash receptacle. So when that dumpster is serviced, it serves all three of the properties.
And is that one up to code, or up to?
It
standards
is,
on
yeah. It's weird because of where it's located, but it's like it's accessed from off the property through the alley instead of being accessed on the property. But
So it's on the other side of Bayless, on the opposite side of this building of Bayless?
it's
So,
so right here. You see that? Move, that's where it is, and if the enclosure faces into the alley, so it's actually easier for these two buildings to
Right.
drop their stuff in the dumpster than it is for Bayless itself. Unusual, long-standing arrangement, but it kind of works for all three properties in this case. But yeah, it does have an enclosure and everything, so.
Yeah, well, and it seems like it's better than maneuvering around that parking lot, the shared parking lot, essentially.
Sure, yeah, definitely. So yeah, that answers one of the questions we had in our letter.
Now, if these are gonna be like restaurant potential uses, is that size, do we have like a size chart that, we might need to up the size of the dumpster? Or
No, there's no requirement to change the size. What you do is you change the frequency at which it's emptied.
Okay,
So if it's filling up real fast, then you would change the frequency at which it's emptied.
and is that something that would be required once, the building department gets a lot of calls then?
Yeah, basically,
Okay.
if there were a problem that was showing up, they would be contacted and told that, look, there's a problem with your dumpster and it's got to get addressed. And that's really the main way to address it is if you're getting it picked up once a week, maybe you go to 3 or 2 times a week or something like that.
Because it seems to be like almost every DDA meeting I've listened to, they talk about issues, not at this site, obviously, but in downtown.
Oh, sure, the collective dumpsters, yeah. in
Yeah,
downtown.
yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Let me grab this out of here.
Is the alley, is it a public easement or is that part of the property of the
It's
subject
it's a
property?
public alley.
So who's responsible? Is there any plan for paving that alley?
That is part of the, so the engineer's letter notes that is a requirement. So when they're doing the back parking lot, they're going to be doing that as well. The other thing about this alley is that the house to the west accesses its garage from the alley. So it's like everybody around it is using the alley to get to where they need to go.
So if it's a public easement or alley, who's responsible for maintaining it once it is paved?
Ultimately, the city, given that it's public property.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the applicant's responsible for the improvement, and then the city will take over
That's
any
right.
maintenance thereon forward?
That's right.
Okay.
Let's see. Do I have anything else on that? No, that was it. As for landscaping, the site doesn't have any right now. So there actually there's some areas here that look somewhat like lawn, but they were actually old driveways and paved areas that had deteriorated to the point where they were not recognizable as such anymore. So all that old pavement is getting taken out of there. That's going to be seeded. They are proposing a concrete plaza in front of the building that includes that seating area. There's a little bit of a grade change at the north end of the property, so there actually will be a little bit of a retaining wall there upon which the seating area will sit. And then they're proposing within that planter boxes and garden beds. There's a tree going in to one of those garden beds. And then up front where you have that area of concrete, they're proposing planter boxes and striping in there to differentiate that area from the on-street parking spaces. Then, when we looked at screening, the site doesn't have a screen wall separating it from the neighboring residents at present. That's an existing nonconformity. There's a row of arborvitae there that's at least partially on the residential property. It seems to be like half in the alley and half on the residential property. There is a public alley, of course, there separating the site from the residential property. Section 514B allows a wall to be placed on the opposite side of an alley if mutually agreeable to all parties. In this case, the wall couldn't be complete because the neighboring residence accesses its garage from the alley. So you have a situation where you'd have a wall that is like maybe when you factor in all the vision corners and things like that, the wall is maybe like 10 feet long or something like that. So it's probably not super practical to implement a wall. You can perhaps do some improvements to the landscaping there. But there's just not going to be a lot of wall if you were to go in that direction. And that, again, with nonconformities, we are allowed to accept certain nonconformities or partial reductions in nonconformities as part of site plan approval on a nonconforming site.
So that wall, in the event that wall is added, would that be another, responsibility of the city once it's for maintenance, or can that be?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think there's room to put one in there.
Yeah.
Between the alley and the property line?
Right, yeah. So Nick makes the point that there may not even be room for one, but the wall is actually the applicant's responsibility once they've built it, even though it's across the alley. It's kind of weird. But again, there's really, you don't get much of a wall and there's not a lot of space for it. So I'm not sure it's practical in this case.
Do we know how the resident that lives there feels about? a
Yeah,
wall
I'm not
versus no
aware
wall?
of the residents' thoughts on it. They would have to agree to it if it was going to go in.
One more question on the dumpster. Since it's not on the site plan, I've got to ask, is that dumpster enclosure, is that on the alley or the city property, or is that on the Bayless Tire property? Who has jurisdiction of that?
I think it actually is in the alley. Nick, am I remembering that correctly? Yeah, because the alley does continue through. At some point in the past, the Bayless development kind of colonized the alley, and it's been like that ever since. And that's where the dumpster enclosure wound up getting built. So I wouldn't want to get too far into like what that means in terms of rights and things, as just not being an attorney. But yeah, it is in the public alley. It's very odd. But that's where it's been for a very long time, and it happened a long time ago, so I'm not real sure exactly what happened or how.
Yeah. Okay.
And
You have a
well,
question? You
well,
look like
I
you wanted
do.
to ask a question.
I do, but I'll ask the applicant. I'm just
Okay.
curious if they've spoke to the neighbor and what their feelings are.
Sure.
So,
Okay, yeah, we can ask the applicant that.
Okay.
We didn't see loading space on the plan. There's a vehicle door on the north side of the site that I asked if perhaps that was a location for loading. But he will address that. I know he's got something in his letter on it. When we look at design specifications and guidelines for the BRD1 district, so I know last time it was mentioned that some people had seen some work happening on this site. There's been a lot of essential stabilization work done to this building. Like to the point where like work needed to be done to keep the roof from caving in and things like that. There was a lot of dangerous masonry work on the front of the building that was kind of coming off that needed to be repaired and stabilized before really anything else could happen on the site.
All permitted work, I assume.
Yeah, all permitted work. So all that's been happening in the background while the site plan has been prepared. But looking at these design guidelines in the BRD1 district, there were a couple that kind of stood out as things to consider: compatibility with surrounding properties, and then screening of rooftop equipment. We didn't see that any rooftop equipment was necessarily proposed. The building does have a parapet that looks like it would be sufficient to screen most standard rooftop equipment, but if they put anything unusual up there, they may have to screen it. So we wanted them to be aware of that. But the proposed building appearance is generally in line with the BRD1 standards in terms of the materials, the composition, and the way the building is being treated overall. Separate application will be required for signage, of course. Pylon sign is noted on the plan. That's got to be changed to ground sign. Pylon signs, of course, aren't permitted. The rendering does actually show a compliant ground sign. Pedestrian circulation, so we have public sidewalks here. Those are going to be maintained. Front yard has that pedestrian plaza that gives you access to the building. The rear space, space C on the floor plans, which is probably going to be used as an office of some sort, but we don't know the final user necessarily yet, is accessed from the rear parking lot. The engineer did have some notes on circulation there that we would definitely work through during engineering review. We didn't get plans for lighting. The applicant indicated in a response letter that they're doing only building lighting, but we still do need to see that. I already addressed the trash enclosure. We do have some sustainability notes in there as well. That's the extent of our review. We included the criteria for granting site plan approval at the very end of the letter as well. Do you have any questions for me before we throw to the applicant? I know there's a lot of stuff going on this site, and it's a very unusual and challenging site, so.
Well, I'm wondering, it looks like it's the same, they're keeping the actual exterior as is, but are they painting that?
The shape of the building is staying the same. And as for the materials, I'll let the applicant speak to that.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back to the dumpster, because I got some questions on that.
Sure,
So,
sure.
I'm looking through the ordinance right now, trying to find specifics on distance away from a residence. Haven't found it yet, but since it's gonna be a bakery, I'm assuming there's maybe a grease trap introduced.
Not for this particular bakery. Everything's made off-site and dropped off at this one. It's a retail bakery only.
But like food, there's gonna be food waste going
Sure.
into the dumpster, more so than there is now, right?
Yep.
So like rats, rodents, stuff like that. I mean, should we look at like the distance from the dumpster?
All right, I don't think our ordinance has a distance standard. I'll verify that, but I don't believe we have one.
I don't think we do either, because the multifamilies usually
Yeah.
abut right to the property line.
Yeah. Yeah,
And is
it's,
this abutting to the residential property line? Or there's still distance between, right, the dumpster? Is it,
I mean, the alley is right there along the residential property line, so it really is pretty much right there.
Right there.
Yeah,
without a wall?
it has a wall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right, it has the enclosure?
Yeah, it has a wall and a
Right.
gate and everything, yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of a toss-up whether the applicant wants to come up and, is the applicant here?
This is him right
I
here.
don't know if you would want to come up and talk first, or if, let us banter a little bit first, and then we'll bring you up, okay?
Sure.
Because I've got a few points. From my perspective, this is a site plan review, and I don't think we should go ahead with an approval of the site plan tonight, for the simple fact that on the site plan checklist, there's all these questions on there. There are 27 items that were not completed on the checklist. That has to be taken care of. The letter we got from our engineering department, AEW, they listed 17 points of problems that they had. Your response letter, you quote duly noted 10 items, and 16 items you say will be added to the final site plan. My preference is that you note them and you add them to the final site plan before you seek a final approval on this.
Absolutely. My architect's working on it currently.
I don't want to let it go this loose right now. You know.
I think he was hoping for some feedback tonight, and then he can bring back a more complete site plan.
Would you like to come up and,
Be happy to.
does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
I have the one I already stated, which I can state again if you need. Have you spoke to the neighbor about the wall?
Of course.
Yeah.
So we discussed, and I told her that there's going to be some construction happening, and I gave her my phone number, and if she had any questions to call me or concerns. Specifically regarding the wall, she planted the arborvitaes there previously to block the view of what was happening to the building, and that was graffiti, windows were broken. So I said, well, whatever you want me to do, I'm happy to do to make sure that you're okay, because we share the same rear driveway. So the definitive answer is she's happy with what's there, and if anything ever becomes too burdensome for her, then we're happy to make whatever changes necessary.
That's refreshing.
Yeah, of course. And frankly, I think that the look of the arborvitaes is a little more natural than, for instance, a block wall or a fence or whatever we plan to put up in the future, which hopefully we don't have to, but that, I guess that's up to you guys.
Yeah. I was curious about the neighbor. Obviously your building's not standing over their backyard or anything, so I feel comfortable, I guess there's no way to check you on that unless the neighbor comes in and tells us. But you do seem like a very trusting guy.
Thanks.
But I feel like definitely if it feels more natural as well. We're always about green space and not cinder blocks. But thank you for that.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, I like the artist concept that you have of the building. It looks good. I'm glad you're keeping the architecture the way
Well, that's my younger cousin. He's a young architect, and I worked with him on that. Took a while, but that's our vision at the end of the day.
I hate to see historical things go away around town.
I agree.
I'd hate to see that bulldozed.
Would you like to know a little history about this building at all?
I grew up as a kid, so it was a gas station when I was a
Yeah.
kid.
Okay. Yes.
You can give us history. Yeah.
Sure.
let's hear it.
Yeah, the building was built as basically the grocery gas stop, where you drive in, the bell rings, you could get to the bathroom from the front. There were 2,000-gallon tanks out front. 1938 was when it was built. It was expanded, by no means up to any code, in the 50s, out the back. And then from that point on, so I'll just give you the kind of.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Joe, could you kill the screen thing? Thank you.
And then it was then added on as a high bay space that was dedicated to painting in the between 63 and 75. I don't know the exact date. And it was all kind of commingled as one space. They used it for oil changes, painted bump shop. And then about 17 years ago, they stopped. The previous buyer, so 2 buyers ago, bought it. Over a weekend, tried to remove the tanks, got caught by the police. Eagle, which is the environmental Great Lakes, was involved. They slapped the property as contaminated, which scared a lot of potential people away. So then made the second buyer, who was buying it from that original buyer, who thought that Clausen was going to become a green standard here, ended up having the obligation to remove the second one, having it contaminated. He didn't know what to do with the property. So my family and I took the risk, my wife and I, to core down to understand what exactly is there. And that's those studies that you'll find on the BEA. It's called the Phase 2. And it shows that when they removed the 2 tanks, there wasn't, in fact, much contamination at all, if any, that there was no intrusion. And that a full excavation was not necessary to remove the dirt to make it any better than it currently is. And any residual gas that is there is 11 feet down, and it's so minuscule, so it poses no potential health safety hazard at all. And the second test we did was a vapor test to find out if there were any vapors that came in through the years that it was used as an auto body shop. And so we did a vapor test, and there's no vapors of any sort that seep through. There were 6 vapor tests in total, 6 different locations. So that led me to, take the larger risk and understand all these, non-compliant issues that we're here discussing today to go in front of. Mr. Kucera, as it relates to the certain site plan reviews, a lot of it is what I would define as more non-material in nature. There's a legal, of the list, legal definitions. There's a few topics that are not addressed. The lighting, they want a dedicated lighting plan of what we plan to do. I've addressed it, you'll see in my response letter, acknowledging each point, and I'll throw that verbiage that they want, such as a legal definition,
Right.
and onto the final site plan. And I was personally hoping that because it's stuff that's non-material relating to the physical bricks and mortar, that we can work through it. And I respect that if you want a final definitive plan approaching those, I'm happy to do it. My architect is working on it. He is not in town, or else I would have had it for you today. With that, that's the kind of stem to stern story of the history of this building. And so when my wife and I went to purchase it, we're going to move our personal business here. We're in the property restoration business, so we have a story to tell with restoring this property from what it is. We have a bakery that's interested, nothing definitive and nothing signed, for the second unit, which is the primary unit that you can see from Main Street. And then the third unit will be a 1,400 square foot space for lease. Our goal is to make it like a loft kind of office look, something like that. With that, I'm happy to answer and address any questions you guys have with plans or detail that you seek.
I think you got a good thing going here. Like I said, I'm just not ready to, I would like the final site plan more detailed than it is, and you
No
agree
problem.
with me on that.
For sure.
And you understand that our dumpster is a questionable thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to make sure if you say you have an agreement using the same dumpster that Bayless does, I'd like to see that's in writing.
Right, it's a handshake with Troy when we're,
know.
out back and,
I've shaken Troy's hand before, but that doesn't work in a court. I'd like to see a piece of paper say that you guys agree. It's the same as shared parking agreements and everything else, but that has to be paper-wise.
I'd love to touch on that if that's okay.
Sure.
So the owners so right now the building to the direct south between our property and Troy's is currently vacant. It's not used. It's owned by, I believe, 2 engineers. I've reached out to the broker. The broker tried to sell me the building instead of actually have a discussion as to how we can work together on a reciprocal easement agreement. That's what the document we would need to sign to use it. They're in the process of selling that property. So all they want to do is get rid of it. It's been on the market for a while. And it's been on the market, frankly, because the building next to it, our building, has been in complete disarray. So I'm hoping that if a new owner comes, if I could afford it currently, I would love to own that as well and kind of have a combined use for an office area there. But if this building can be finished to what we think, what you see on that rendering, I think that building will either go to a new owner, and I would love to propose to that owner, hey, here's a REA, so we're on the same page as it relates to the parking. And then the dumpster, this is just a crazy nonconformity that is something I'm happy to work with. I'm happy to bring something to Troy and give him a one-page document we can throw on record. But I feel like Troy is the type of guy that I'm going to shake his hand, he's going to shake mine, we're going to look at each other and say, this is what we're going to do. So if that's okay with you, I can get something, and if it's not, I can get you a more definitive document that says, that assigns the issues.
That'd be fine. Anything in writing, I think, that would stand up legally on it. That, and just fill in some of the blanks on the,
Can I insert, with
Sure.
it would seem like you can have that a part of the deed, like the easement with the parking, seems like that would be easily conveyed through the deed, and, I kind of follow your sentiment on you know, if Troy's okay with that, I think that would be all the better.
Okay.
And really, it's something we've asked, our town has a lot of these, and it's something that we just want to ensure and kind
Cool.
of do our diligence with that. So
No problem.
even if it was in one kind of signed document together, that'd be more than fine. But yeah, I think that is important for sure.
No problem.
Thank you.
But aside from the lease of the dumpster, it doesn't sound like this Troy guy actually has jurisdiction of the dumpster enclosure, though.
No, he doesn't have jurisdiction.
So that's the question that really needs to be asked is an agreement with Troy even valid?
That's
That's a
true.
great,
He does pay for it to be emptied, right?
Well, again, that's just the dumpster itself.
I mean, and he has an easement to use, essentially, because he's been using it for so long.
I mean, that's a good question for the city attorney.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Yeah,
It's a good question.
so,
these are good questions
Oh,
that
darn,
we
he's not here.
should kind of,
yeah.
I don't want to get Troy in trouble. I like Troy a lot.
no, we're not talking about Troy.
Sounds like a
It's
great
not
guy.
personal.
I just don't
Yeah.
think he owns the land to
Yeah.
make
To
an
even
agreement.
convey that to you, right? He
Sure,
can't convey an
right,
easement there.
interesting, sure.
Right. Yeah, that does, so maybe we can ask Joe and Nick if we can get some solid idea on.
Yeah, and if he now does have it through, what is it, eminent domain, then, or whatever, is he paying taxes on it? There's a lot of questions.
Well, I mean, I'm
here.
not worried,
I mean,
but I would
you
say
know.
like at least a shared dumpster agreement.
Sure.
The dumpster
Yeah.
itself might be shared with the two occupants and saying, we're agreeing to split the costs or something to me, would make sense,
Sure.
but maybe defer to Joe and our attorney on that. I don't know.
You got it.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for all the history. I've always thought that was perfect for a bakery, actually, so,
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. So,
Very good.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh, or-
I have a
did you-
question, but it's probably more for Joe and those guys, because I was kind of curious around, obviously, it's not a new build, it's, taking an existing structure, but they are doing some parking lot work and things like that. Do we know about drainage, detention, stormwater, anything else? 'Cause
Yeah, I
It looks like
think-
they're gonna add some
Good,
potential
good
green space.
question. Yeah, they are adding a little bit of green space up front. We asked the engineer about this, and there's a certain square footage threshold for new pavement that would require detention, and this site doesn't meet it.
Okay,
So they are actually in the clear on that.
okay, thanks for confirming.
And
that.
it does meet the landscaping, right? I thought
Yeah,
so.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
I thought so, okay.
If there's no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
I thought we were just giving feedback.
Well, I
Are we
think-
supposed to move this, Joe?
You can make a motion to postpone.
or postpone.
Postpone that? Yeah.
And
Postpone.
how do
Yeah.
we feel about our agenda in the next meeting and how quickly the applicant can come back to us? Because I'm excited that you want to move quickly and we don't want to hold you up too long, but goes with what do we have on the next agenda and
I think a fair motion would just
We
be,
don't always-
motion
To a
to
later
postpone
date.
it to a later date to give him the flexibility.
I can-
If he can come back next meeting, I think he would love to, but obviously they've got to make sure their plans are ready to go and get
Postpone
some type
simply
of.
to the applicant's convenience whenever he's ready to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was a meeting tomorrow night, he would do everything he can to get it in front of you then.
Okay.
Oh, fine. Chair, sorry,
To that effect?
I didn't know if you wanted to open it up, because there are people from the public, and give an opportunity, nobody has to speak,
are?
but at least,
Does
I mean,
anyone-
we have some faces that aren't always here, so maybe we can open it up just for comment if they want to.
I'll give it a try. Is there anybody here from the public want to?
About this building?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm so excited, I'm about 6 houses away, so, and your workers are lovely.
Thank you.
Very nice, and I've gone to them 100 times, what's going on, and everything don't ask me about it.
Microphone, please.
Do you want to come to the microphone?
Microphone, please.
Oh,
I'll wait till the.
Okay, you have an endorsement there. Anybody else from public regarding this? Seeing none, I will then close the public and entertain a motion to
Okay.
postpone.
and did we decide on a meeting date? Sorry.
no, just
Yes.
at a later date.
At his
Oh.
convenience.
Okay, I'll make a motion to postpone this site, sorry, I had it written down, 502 South Main Street, postpone it until the applicant is ready with final site plans.
Second.
I'll second.
Motion, I have second. No further comments. I'll take roll call, please.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Mr. Cusero,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Clausen.
Thank you.
Well, we're-
I lived on Charlotte for like 8 years, so which is almost crossed.
We'll work with you. Okay, agenda item number 8 is presentation of the capital improvement plan. Mr. Tangieri?
Oh, now
I got it.
Or Nick? Who
I
wants
get
to-
to sit for this one.
Come on.
Let us know if you have questions we should ask. No, I'm kidding. As a
You guys are
professional.
stuck with me on this one. And I just want to say, Darren has been awesome to work with, and I think everyone's really excited to see this property be redeveloped. It's been one of those ones that's been an eyesore for a while, and I think he's going to do a fantastic job there, and excited to see, what he's able to do with it.
2 endorsements.
What was that?
2 endorsements.
Oh,
tonight.
yeah. All right, so in the planning commission packet, there were about 6 pages of documents, 2 memos, one from myself and one from finance director Mark Pollock. And then there were 2 other documents which included the list of capital improvement items that we are looking to address in the next fiscal year. And then, of course, the years down the road. And so just to start off with this conversation, I just wanted to go read the memo for the record that I drafted, and then kind of go through Mark's and identify some projects that we have looking to accomplish in the next fiscal year. So the city of Clausen has undergone a transformative journey in enhancing our approach to capital improvement planning. Through a combination of staff changes, council guidance, and influence, and other factors, we've refined our strategy to prioritize tangible progress over administrative complexities. Recognizing the need for efficiency, the administration has opted for a streamlined presentation of our capital improvement plan, allowing us to devote more time and resources to actual enhancements for the community. City staff, in collaboration with leadership, have diligently compiled and consolidated capital requests and presented these items during dedicated workshops held on February 13th and February 27th with the City Council. These sessions facilitated constructive dialogue between department heads and the City Council, ensuring alignment with our collective vision to improve Clausen. The capital improvement plan and FY 24-25 budget have been developed in unison to deliver tangible results, not just a plan. The resultant plan, crafted through collaborative efforts, reflects a clear objective: identify needs, propose projects with associated costs, present them to council, and integrate the capital improvement plan items into our budget. Given the council's significant role as the funding authority, the initial draft is now being presented to the Planning Commission for a comprehensive review. In addition to the overarching CIP plan encompassing all city projects, a supplementary document focusing on infrastructure improvements has been developed. However, the completion of this plan is contingent upon the potential approval of a bond proposal slated for the November 2024 ballot. This proposal is outlined in the additional memo provided by Finance Director Mark Pollock. These initiatives, identified through evaluation by the Department of Public Works and Engineering via the Pavement and Surface Evaluation Rating PACER study and assessment of water mains condition, resulted in the Supplemental Infrastructure Improvement Plan. While the format of this year's CIP document may differ, it reflects an enhanced level of collaboration and deliberation among stakeholders. Our focus remains steadfast on affecting tangible improvements to our city. So with all of that said, I hope you've all had the opportunity to review that memo before the meeting, and also the memo provided by Mark Pollock. I don't want to go through and read his memo word for word, but specifically run through the projects identified, if that is okay with the Planning Commission tonight. I guess before I go, does anyone have any questions?
The interesting sentence I find in what you just read, what you just wrote, you wrote that, right?
I did.
Yes, okay. The interesting sentence I found is that, however, the completion of this plan is contingent upon the potential approval of a bond proposal slated for the November 2024 ballot. So what we're doing is we're coming up with a wish list, and we're basing it on numbers that the bond will pass? Is that the numbers we're playing with? That we're not playing with real numbers, we're playing with,
So there's
Numbers
two
we're
different
hoping to get.
approaches, and that's why we have the supplemental infrastructure plan as well as their CIP. So the capital improvement plan, the first document in chronological order in the packet is impacted by our regular general fund budget. The additional infrastructure plan that is directly for road and water main improvements is, I would say, contingent on the bond proposal, but those are the projects that we have identified that we'd spend that bond money on. And so if the proposal is approved in November, that's the list we would go off of. If it's not, that's still the list of our priority projects we want to address. And so if
okay,
it's
the
not,
list will stay the same whether we have the money to do it or not.
exactly. So we're providing the list. If we get the money, great, we'll be able to, hit the ground running and continue the momentum we've built with our miscellaneous concrete program and the few larger infrastructure projects we've been able to make. And again, if that bond proposal is not approved, we'll address those projects as efficiently as we can with our funding.
Is this the entirety of the CIP?
Yes, that is the projects. And so, like I said in the memo.
This is so different than anything
Yes,
we've
it
ever
is.
been presented. Completely different.
And it is that way to make it easier, less complex, more time focused on the actual projects we're addressing. We've gone through these projects with our city council in workshops, identified these capital items with department heads, presented to the council, and there is a general consensus of the direction we want to go with the administration and city council.
But this doesn't have anything about the recreation department. Like, we've gone through CIPs, or, I mean, most of us have at least one, where we've got every single department broken down, and, they scale it 1 to 5. We get a real sense of who they are, what they're doing, and, I mean, I personally enjoyed that component of it, and I think that it does show more of your tax dollars at work. This only looks, I mean, and it's fine that you have city infrastructure, sewer stuff, but like, where's the picnic tables? Where's everything that we talked about last year? And, the components that, we're more than just police and streets, right? I think.
Well, the reason the picnic tables aren't in the CIP is because they're going to be acquired by the end of this fiscal year.
Well, that's wonderful. I think there was more than picnic tables.
I think that was one of the few Parks and Rec items. But no, these are the items that we've discussed with department heads and that are presented for this next fiscal year. And if you look at Mr. Pollock's memo, you'll see that at the end of each excerpt, he has the 2024-2025 fiscal year and the costs associated. So a large number of those projects are already budgeted or to be budgeted in the next fiscal year as presented. And so we're aiming to address a number of these capital requests. And we've already begun some of those this fiscal year. For example, the CCTV program, which will still be included in the CIP. The city council elected to initiate that program now so we can get a head start on it, so we can make sure, again, pending the approval of the bond, that we identify which water mains truly need to be addressed in the sewers, of course, as well.
And it's kind of a different format than what we're used to seeing up here. 2 or 3 years ago, we didn't even touch this thing, and then we found out that it's part of our job as planning. We're supposed to look at the CIP. And I thought the idea was that we look at it and we revolve numbers, and our numbers then go to mayor and council for them to make their decision. And what's happening now is it looks like you're pitching mayor and council then and bringing the numbers back to us. You don't want our approval, right? I mean, what do you really want from the planning commission? You want our blessing that?
Well, and I don't see how this ties in. What I liked about that is we could work that into our master plan, right?
Right.
I don't see how this
We
works into it.
pick subjects and topics and dollar figures to suggest to mayor and council, but this has already been done and apparently approved or run past mayor and council already. So do you need our blessing on it? I don't see.
I mean, we would like to get your approval for it, but a lot of these, almost all these projects have been vetted through council. And so as they're the final funding authority, that's the direction that we've taken this year.
So did you have the library give their little list?
Yep, during the February 13th workshop, every single department outside of Parks, Rec, and DPW, we had a roundtable discussion with City Council, which is available on our YouTube channel now if you would like to watch, where every department head gave their list of capital items that they're working on, specific things they're hoping to address in the next fiscal year. And then during the February 27th presentation, we had the DPW and Parks and Rec give PowerPoint presentations. As obviously the Department of Public Works has the bulk of capital improvement items over the next few years that need to be addressed. And so that's been our approach, is to focus on infrastructure. We've been really trying to beat the drum on infrastructure, as you know, this body's talked about very passionately over the last year. And so that's been our approach, is to make infrastructure one of our first priorities.
Yeah, that's the way we've done it in the past. Like, it was, I don't know, 6 years ago, so when I was on council, and I sat in that seat, and every part of town, the DPW came in front of us, fire department, they all asked for what they wanted. And we sat and listened to them, and made a list. We did it ourselves. And now, then it was taken that I thought you wanted the planning commission's input on it, but I'm not seeing us being questioned at all.
So we certainly would entertain your input, but the Plan and Enabling Act, which embodies this board, is a little bit unclear of how the capital improvement plan is presented and the steps that it takes. Mm-hmm. And so due to various decisions made previously, there was an approach that was had where it was more focused on, drafting a plan that had pictures and numbers and it looks great, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not actionable. And so our approach this year was to make it actionable, make sure the council is aware that it's fit into the budget, where we can come back and, look at that document and say, all right, we've addressed the fire station parking lot is in need of repair for $25,000 in FY 24-25. And at the end of FY 25, we can check that box off and say it's done.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So I wasn't involved in the last CIP, but I'm looking at the 2020 CIP just for reference, and there is Figure 2, which is the CIP adoption process. So this is more of my concern and question, because look and feel, I could care less. I'm okay with a streamlined approach as long as it's outlined in a way that we can all make sense and review it. But in this process, there is, it says, the first line, adoption process involves a public hearing to solicit citizen input, and then will be modified, approved by the planning commission, and then moved forward to city council for adoption. So one, have we done the public hearing portion, or is that tonight?
That'll be done during the city council. They'll have a public hearing as part of their budget
Okay, so
and
this
other items.
is a little backwards in terms, and I don't know if this was a formal process that we should be reviewing, or if that was just a recommendation in the 2020 CIP, because it shows that step between public hearing, then to planning, then adoption.
Well, the
Or
public hearing
the
was at
city.
planning, right?
Yes, so
And
that's
I-
where I'm trying to just
Yeah.
facilitate, is that's not a formal process, that was just a suggestion, the 2022.
Suggested process, and I believe that plan you're looking at is one that was developed by Giffords Webster, and so they provided a quote to do the CIP for us. This decision at the time was to have them draft and present that, which, of course, their time is valuable, and so we spend our resources on their time to develop the plan. And so by doing the plan in-house, is it a little bit rolled back on the scale of what the plan looks like? Certainly.
Yeah.
But again, we're more focused on, using that funding for actual projects so we can get picnic tables and
I just, again,
do
I
that.
wanted
Yeah.
to make sure that the citizen involvement and public hearing and all that still takes place.
Yes,
And it seems like that'll be happening after we make a recommendation here.
correct.
Okay.
So what qualifies to fit on this then? Where's your, and remind me, is there a certain dollar amount that qualifies for the CIP?
I believe that's $5,000 that.
5,000 or more?
Yes.
So within a year, or just for one, obviously it's not for a whole year, but it's one particular item or a group of items?
One item or a group of items, yeah.
Okay, so there was nothing that the library, I would like to know, make sure that everybody is given proper ability to get at our resources. I'm not against supporting infrastructure, police, but it feels like infrastructure and police and DPW is pretty much dominant. And is there a mechanism that makes sure that other areas are being served as well?
Yeah, and like I've said, we've done that. We've vetted it, had the presentations
I know you had
with
the presentations, but who actually says yes or no to those presentations?
the city council does,
Yeah, so the city council formed this list then,
based on feedback from the administration.
based on feedback from them?
It's a collaborative effort to draft this document.
Okay.
This was presented, the numbers and figures that we're seeing here, I'm assuming this is Giffords and Webster's work,
This one?
is it not?
No,
No.
this is all in-house.
It's all in-house.
Yeah, they were not involved in the CIP this year or the year before. It was 2 years ago.
I was wrong, and I thought you said that. So this is all in-house, this is all each department head coming to the mayor and council, having discussion, and then it's condensed into this, is what we're seeing in front of us?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want us to just bless it overall, or can we comment on it? Can we change numbers if we want?
I mean, I don't know how you'd be able to change the dollar figure, as those are based on quotes by our professional staff that have done research on these items. I mean, you can certainly provide recommendations that we'll take to council and change it accordingly.
That's what I thought you were seeking was our opinion on the CIP, but if you simply want our blessing, I'm willing to bless it as it stands.
I just got a question, like, is there another document somewhere that addresses some of the infrastructure, or is this at the water sewer fund?
Well, there's
Like where,
this one, I don't know if you saw
Well,
that.
that's-
That's
okay.
the roads.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the draft.
I saw a draft, so.
Here, I have an extra copy I can bring up there.
And what's the date that this needs to be moved to council by?
I believe the goal is to have the CIP approved with the budget the first meeting in May.
I don't know. We don't have a say, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern was the citizen input.
Yeah.
I would prefer to happen before I made any recommendation, just to feel confident in my decision. But other than that, I'm not sure how the process worked previously, because I came in just after you guys did. last year.
It feels like a formality, because like
Yeah, I don't know
the
what I'm-
last year and the year before,
It is,
and
yeah.
every other time we've approached it, Giffords Webster has done a very extensive job at, like, we even got to talk to the, department heads, and it feels like it's been streamlined to administration, and it's simply a formality that it's here. So, I mean, what do we do?
The agenda item says presentation of the capital improvement plan, so we're not taking a vote on this or anything, right? Or we're just,
To
We're just having-
approve it and recommend that council adopt it.
But that wasn't,
you want to vote to approve it, or just,
That would be ideal as we requested.
if,
presentation, the presentation meant that you wanted an approval on it?
Yeah, I mean, we're presenting the plan to get your approval on it, yes.
then you want to make a motion to approve what they presented to us?
Can I ask one more question? I just want to make sure I understand. So there's a bond proposal that's included here, and I'm going to restate what I think I heard you say. If the bond passes, we can do more. If the bond doesn't pass, we can only do this a little bit. I guess I'm just not seeing where the cutoff is. So if the bond doesn't pass, what doesn't get done?
So are you referring to the infrastructure?
Yeah.
Specific document? So those projects are currently budgeted to occur with that bond money. If we don't, we would have to take our fund balance, operating fund, and figure out how we can, make ends meet to do some of these projects. And then we would just start down the list and identifying and working on those projects that have the low pacer study.
Available.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, the wish list would stay the same.
So it wouldn't change any, it doesn't really change anything. It's just how much can we do?
Right.
Sure, because this is priority listed, the one document you gave us.
Yes,
So you would basically go as far down the list as possible with the available funds.
absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, if you want to vote for approval of it?
Yes, please.
Okay, you make a motion to that effect.
I'll make I guess I'll make a motion to, what?
Approve the presentation.
To approve the presentation, yeah.
Presented CIP.
There we go.
If I can join in.
Yeah,
So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the city manager, Nick's the assistant
Do
city
you want to go to the
manager.
microphone so everybody can hear you?
For those of you who don't know who I am, I know there's a couple new faces. My name's Joe Raker, I'm the city manager. Nick has distinguished himself over the last 4 years and earned the title of assistant city manager and director of community and economic development. He's done a fantastic job bringing this forward to you and streamlining it. As you know, we have, well, some of you may not know, we have a returning finance director from 2018 who had been the finance director and city manager for 18 years here in Clawson. And after he was no longer here in 2018, a lot of the challenges that this community faced occurred because of his absence. And now that he's back, we're righting the ship. One of the biggest things last year was the advocacy for infrastructure. Infrastructure, I talked about it during my interview as far as the roads. When I was interviewed, 2017 PACE report is in the previous master plan, and it talked about curb cuts and road aesthetics, but it didn't talk about the need to address your road system, and your road system is obviously a big issue. New council members came on board this past November with the advocacy of really pushing infrastructure, along with former members of this body. And we've heard that demand, and with Mark Pollock back on board, we have resurrected this PFM presentation, which you'll see on the 16th. And that is, there's two separate things going on here. You have your this year's CIP, and then the projected following years of where we'll pay for capital improvements. And then you have the additional information, which is in regards to the projects that we would do from a capital improvement perspective, but only if we get the bond money, which is going to be on a ballot initiative, hopefully in November. So the Planning Enabling Act does have some nuances. I've been in 4 different communities, and this is the only community that I've ever been in where they approve the capital improvements plan. So that being said, that was new to me, which in the first year, if you remember, Mr. Casera, I pulled it because it wasn't ready for prime time, because the finance director at the time was out of the state, and I was like, I'm unfamiliar with this. This does not. But the problem is that it doesn't go in front of a lot of planning commission communities because it doesn't have any teeth to require us to do the things that we do. One of the nuances that we're looking at is I'm not looking to sideline anybody. I want, in fact, what we need more than ever, as I say, remember November. If council is supportive of having a bond initiative on the agenda. I'm trying to answer the mail on all of the concerns, especially with Planning Commission. So I think we've done that with the additional information that we provided as far as the infrastructure and the funding mechanism that we'll need for that. If you stop and you think about it from a Planning Commission perspective, when you start talking about computers and picnic tables, it's way outside the scope of Planning Commission.
That's what I thought when they put it on us a couple of years ago.
And that's why I said I am totally unfamiliar with why this would go before council. But since I've been here, it has gone in that direction. Largely the sentiment that we've gotten back, feedback from the Planning Commission is infrastructure, which is obviously the biggest issue in this community. And I think you can see from that document that we have a solution coming forward on that issue specifically. It's going to take, the will of the people to get it over the goal line, but that's really the only way from that infrastructure perspective and concern that's going to happen. The rest of the CIP stuff, we're answering the mail in regards to the Planning Enabling Act, but I have been in question as far as why would the Planning Commission be talking about picnic tables,
Well, I
radios?
might, and I was with you at the beginning, but over time, I've started to see how we can use that as a way to help us get an idea of a master plan in certain aspects, a general vision, right? Computers might not be the general vision, but improvements to a city hall might be. And that might be something that we formulate within a master plan, or whatever, Parks and Rec, if they're, negating or needing advocacy on certain things, then that might be something that we look to enhance and further solidify within a master plan. Whether or not you agree, I don't know.
Yeah,
It doesn't
I'm
matter
gonna- I'm
to
gonna
me.
diplomatically disagree on that
That's
part.
absolutely, you're entitled to that. But,
I like it. I think it's giving us less work to do.
I mean, it
Takes
is,
it off
but
our
I
plate.
I just want to make sure that, the departments are all having their voice. And it's not just totally streamlined through, and it's not personal.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why, and I'm not putting the mayor on the spot, but I'm kind of putting the mayor on the spot. I specifically asked her to be here tonight because I had a fear that there may be a concern, because I don't want you to feel marginalized. But this has taken on a different angle and an earlier attempt to engage council. So all your concerns as far as, hey, has everyone been heard? Absolutely. I mean, the meetings have been televised, and I mean, any oh by the ways that some of the department heads have, we've done our best to include them as well. There are not many, or any for them. I mean, we've discussed them. I was like, no, it'll go into the next fiscal year. But I mean, by and large, we started the process much earlier, just because that was the direction of council. I mean, we started having conversations in January, where normally we don't start having this conversation until, I mean, when I first got here, I started in March. So I mean, it was already a little late then. But I think what can happen, or what probably should happen, is if we get the bond proposal over the goal line, a lot of those things are socialized and prioritized, from a very engineering specific type of criteria, whether it's, the one thing that we haven't done yet is the actual sewer system hasn't been cambered in the last almost 20 years. So we have to do that to understand exactly what under the roads needs to be addressed and prioritize that, and then plug that in to if you look on that list of, there's no sewer on there, that still has to be identified. And so we're anticipating the possibility of upwards of $10 million worth of work that needs to be done just in sewers.
That's where that decision is better made by the DPW or by you in administration than it is by us on planning.
Right, but I think what would be best is in the future, is that's why we're sharing that information with you, is that you're seeing that we're answering the mail on your issues with infrastructure.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to do. And like, hey, these are all the things that we're looking at, and these are the projects and the plans. The funding mechanism is not there. It may be there, hopefully, in November.
Right.
And so that's why I was concerned that, maybe you, and I don't blame you, because I'm not taking your time for granted by any stretch of imagination, which is why I asked the mayor to attend, because you might feel slighted that, hey, like, we got out ahead of this. The truth is, the council did get out earlier than anticipated, when it came to, establishing the CIP for this year, in conversations that happened in February 13th and I think the 27th. So if the mayor would like to speak on this, I'm not putting her on the spot, but if you have anything that you'd like to say, ma'am?
I just got a real quick question.
Sure.
So this is a general question. So say it does pass in November, and we get the funding to do cammering all the sewers.
No, that's already happening. What's happened is council has approved already this year a budget amendment, so that camera, so what's happening right now, AEW is putting together the bid proposal, which will hit the street in the next couple weeks, so that we have that contractor will be identified, and the contract awarded, so that starts still this fiscal year.
So by November, when it's proposed, there will be some type of provision for addressing the sewer system.
Hopefully, yes. I mean, we'll have at least preliminary information.
I'm just, if we pass a bond this year, is it going to come up another bond next year? Or that's why I was asking the question.
No, because what's driving that is our ability to borrow. It's like your income to debt ratio as a homeowner. We have one as a city,
Okay.
and we're only able to borrow so much based on our debt millage that we can carry. And so we'll have two proposals. There might be three just to demonstrate. Like, one is, hey, you absolutely maximize it. I think back in 2021, you had your debt millage was at 6 mils, and now it's falling. I think it's at 4.9, and we're proposing either two options, maybe three, but one definitely keeping it at 4.9, which generates roughly, and I think Mark mentions it in his memo, that generates roughly $45 million, and returning it to 6 generates $55 million. So, and we're arguably up against $177 million worth of infrastructure needs. So we can't possibly borrow enough to do it. I
So
mean,
do you
right-
think that there is an importance to having this presented to the planning commission or not?
What do you mean? What part of it?
Well, any of it, the CIP at all?
I think the infrastructure piece, radios and
I mean, not
whatnot,
this one specifically, but I meant in general.
I think when it comes to the CIP, yes, I mean, especially when there's a bond initiative. In fact, I mean, I plan on talking to all of the boards and commissions about this in some way, shape, or form, because you're all voters and you all have a stake in this. But I mean, I like I said, that's why I pulled it 2 years ago. I was like, what the hell is this going before the planning commission? This doesn't make any sense. It didn't happen Harper Woods, Mount Clemens, Detroit, where I was at beforehand. I don't recall this ever. And so,
And I respect that.
Yeah.
The only thing that kind of threw me this time is because the previous years, there was such an importance, and it was like a long kind of 2-month thing. And so if it is important to be in front of us, I would love to somehow make it something that's consistent and knowable what we're looking at and the importance of looking at year after year. And maybe we can work on that once this is all kind of, because that's kind of what threw me off, is like we had graphs
Yes,
upon
yes.
graphs,
No.
right?
And you paid for that too. And
Yeah.
we believe that we could bring it in-house and identify things, because this does change from year to year, because circumstances, funding mechanisms, whether it grants or whatnot, other opportunities, other pressing priorities, it gets shuffled around.
Right,
So
but the format can stay the same, right? The presentation of it?
ideally, you know,
Mm-hmm.
with Mr. Pollock and a future succession plan that I hope occurs, yes, this is be a much more streamlined, succinct approach. But you would also have that component that you have in there, but with a little more greater finalization and formalization, because hopefully there's a funding mechanism that says, hey, these projects are in this coming year. So I have every intent to keep you informed of that. But the fact of like you guys deliberating on radios, computers, and
Yeah.
picnic tables, 2 years ago it was foreign to me, and it's still kind of strange to me now. But I mean, I'm here because there was a level of consistency that, you know, since I've been here, we're doing this. All right, let's keep it going. But it came to you kind of already partially baked because council got out in front of it much earlier this year.
So my only, and this is as a fairly newer member, and I'm just referencing documents, and this one specifically is from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They have their process flow chart that they do have the planning commission involved, but as you mentioned, I'm not an expert. It seems like experts already weighed in on here to create a prioritization list and go through all the documents you provided. The only piece that I'd feel more comfortable giving a recommendation to move this to city council for adoption would be if we had a public hearing at this point in time rather than before just so I can
Yeah.
at least feel like, okay, at least the citizens, we gave them the opportunity to see this, to talk about their
quite
prioritization, and then I
honestly-
feel confident making a decision.
Pardon me, Mr. Solomon.
Yeah,
but
go on.
You bringing that up was the first time I heard like a public hearing, because like the first time we did this 2 years ago, we didn't have a public hearing at the planning commission.
And I'm
So-
just referencing the
Yeah.
flow chart that I see, and I
Yeah,
don't know if that's a
and
formalized
I don't know if it is
approach
or
a
isn't,
recommendation.
but it is definitely something that, since I've been here, we have not had a public hearing on a CIP in
Didn't you
regards
say that
to.
our plan had one on it from a
According
previous?
to the 2022 document, it was part of the process flow for that one as well.
It may have been part of the, but I don't remember us having an actual public hearing unless the agenda from that meeting shows like, hey, we had a public hearing and we stamped it through. I didn't look.
And again, this
that
is a
closely
guiding
at it.
document, so it's
Yeah.
kind of like our master plan, right? It's the ideal, where do we focus? It's not gonna guide exactly what happens, but
Right.
help make decisions. So I also alleviates a little bit of my concern if I approve or not.
I mean, in order to try and stay on the timeline, so council did lean forward and ask that, hey, we do this sooner rather than later. As far as the first approval in May, we had a council meeting and they said, hey, we'd like to approve it at the first meeting in May. I'm here to try and keep this process online, on target, on time, as far as that May 2nd requirement. I'm not necessarily sure that the public weighing in on these items is going to add any more.
Well, it's the integrity of it, the integrity of putting that option out
Spending
there.
tax down, yeah.
Right, and giving them an opportunity, whether or not they also have one at council. I would just like to know if that's a required part of our process or not, because I don't want to.
That's all I was trying to find, but it sounds
Yeah.
like it's not, there's no requirement.
Requirement, okay.
Formally, either through the city of Clawson or Michigan, it's recommendations and flow charts that I could find.
You said the mission, no, Joe?
That it does not.
Does not, oh, okay.
So we will have the public hearing during a regular council meeting at the first meeting, I should say, in May. And if there's any concerns on it at that time, it can be brought up. But I mean, our meeting in regards to the department heads and what their needs and desires were are televised, they're open to the public. The council members were well aware in advance. The department heads were well aware in advance, and it was a pretty, pretty transparent back and forth, hey, this is what we need. And before, when you referenced, Mr. Casera, when the council members, not the council members, but the department heads would come before you and talk to you, what would happen, and it would be like, members of council would be like, well, what else can we do for you? And it's like, that's why we changed this, so that they can have that conversation ahead of time before the budget is baked. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be like having those questions in May, have them in February. And so we've had those questions in May, and if you take a look at the infrastructure presentation by DPW, you'll see that it's pretty extensive with the work that they did in addressing the concerns of infrastructure that have been the concerns of members of this body and the city council and this administration.
So, Josh, are you feeling comfortable? I would argue that I know the attendance and the views are much better on city council, so I do feel like it gets a better exposure there. But are you feeling comfortable with it at city council as a public hearing? I know that you brought that up as a concern for us.
I was making a suggestion if we ever formalize a process.
Oh.
I'm not going to roadblock this.
Yeah.
I appreciate
At
your
this
support
point,
there.
you know.
But one of the things internally we talked about with the other nuances is there might be in the future after this, there might be some value in clarifying this between council and the planning commission that, it is possibly a receive and file, not because if we were to like, all right, hey, we're backing this up to council having conversations in January, well then you guys will be having conversations about a future budget from the last year's budget that hasn't even been audited yet. Right. And so, I mean, the good thing is we're leaning forward to make progress, and I mean, it's a good problem to have. It just needed to have greater clarification. And again, by no means was the administration, and I'm pretty confident council wasn't trying to marginalize the planning commission by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, I'd like to give the mayor equal time.
I promise not equal time. First of all, sitting back here in this room for this meeting brings me back to my first year here in Clawson when I served on the planning commission for 4 years. And you guys do an exceptional job. You've had some really heavy things before you lately. There's a lot of public engagement. And I just want to thank you for looking out for what's best for our community, not just for today, but for the future. And what you're doing, this conversation today is the same thing, right? We have limited funds to spend, and we want to ensure they go in the right place. And Aaron, when you said our city is more than, paraphrasing, police, roads, and DPW or whatever, I think that every day too. And although our task right now before us is all of these infrastructure things that are so costly and so daunting to us. I'm so grateful that we have an administration and a city council and a planning commission and all of our other supporters that are on the same page and wanting to move us forward. Sitting back, I didn't want anyone here to feel marginalized by this process. We started this early because we had a mandate to understand the budget moving forward this year. Mr. Raker's first year on, he came in just before budget time, right? And didn't have time to really do a lot. Last year had its own set of challenges. And this year, I feel like we're finally on some good footing, solid footing, and people are working well together, and we're making progress that Clawson hasn't seen in a really long time, just because people are getting together and people are taking risks and doing the difficult things that need to be done. And I just want to say that from a city council standpoint, I, for one, would never minimize this body. You guys, I will tell anyone, work harder than we do on city council and make tougher decisions on most days than we do on city council, and what you do is extremely appreciated. So I hope no one felt minimalized or marginalized by the process today. I think the intent was to bring it to you the same way it was basically presented to us, which is we sat with the department heads, and they did give their wish list, very minimalized because they understand the reality of everything. But I think the administration's plan is to make sure there's a little piece in there for every department, because we never want anyone to feel left out, because we want to grow everything. And even though we need to fix our infrastructure and put massive amounts of dollars into these things that aren't fun, we still have to take care of the other things as we go along. Otherwise, we won't have park benches or picnic tables or all these other things that we need to. So I didn't really give you any confidence in anything other than I promise you we appreciate you and that we're not trying to usurp the process. And I, for one, want to hear your input. I think the rest of council would too. And if we have a public hearing, I urge you all, if you're available, to come and be part of that and share your input at the same time. I think it's really great when all of the bodies come together and we know that we're all on the same page, or perhaps get to take look at something a little differently because people have a different slant. And this body is critically important to planning for our budgets because you have the master plan. You're looking to that, and we need to build towards that. We need to spend our finances towards that. So I'll end with that. It's a little bit shorter time than his, maybe not a lot, but thank you again for all that you do.
Appreciate you making our job easier.
Well, and I just want to say personally, I didn't feel marginalized at all, but when things change in a drastic way, it's very natural, at least for me, to question and be curious of it. So if anybody thought that or at least me, I didn't mean to offend, I wasn't marginalized, I just curious. It's the first time we kind of talked about it. So that's at least me, but
No hard feelings.
no hard feelings, yeah.
Having the mayor and myself here on this was specifically to iron out this wrinkle if I kind of saw it coming, so.
Okay, good. Good
I'll
thoughts.
entertain a motion, which is,
Thank you.
there.
The arrows now. I will move to accept the proposed capital improvement plan as presented and recommend the city council approve the plan as part of the 2024-2025 fiscal year budget. Thanks.
roll call on that?
Can you do that for every motion?
Work on it.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 9 is continued discussion of short-term rentals.
And didn't we move that to council or no?
No, you
Come
asked
back
me to
to us.
bring back a communication to you that you could vet before sending it to council,
Oh, okay.
which is what you have in your packet.
Okay.
And basically what it boiled down to was the planning commission had some concerns about the existing short-term rental ordinance, and before moving forward on zoning, it wanted to attempt to address those or at least communicate its concerns. So I provided a short memo that I think and hope captures those concerns, and I think basically the idea here tonight is for you to look at that and say, yes, we think this captures our concerns. Yes, we have some consensus on these opinions. And then it would move along to council for them to consider it. Doesn't obligate them to do anything, but it would at least put it on their radar.
Well, and I'm curious, because for 2 years now, maybe 3, we've been told over and over again that it's a residential use, we can't not allow it to be but there's clearly been law and court, Michigan Supreme Court precedent set that it is not a residential use. If that might be something we'd want to inform city council about, and the transient nature, and the, I would even say the need for housing. But that's just my thoughts.
Can we actually enforce the points that you list in your letter here about periodic inspection of short-term rental units for structural safety, fire regulation compliance, and general safety?
I would leave that, a response on that to administration. I don't know what our capacity for that is. Given the low number of units, I imagine it would be
We
possible.
don't have that many. I haven't heard any complaints about them. Like I said, I saw the one on 14 Mile was crammed for St. Patrick's Day.
I've gotten complaints on them.
I've heard no complaints about that. You
I have, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was at one, Chair Casera, I think I brought it up here at one of our meetings. It just turned out that someone that I know ended up, unbeknownst to me, staying at a short-term rental here in the city. And when I was over there, they made me quite aware of some of the situations in the house that would be dangerous to some of the renters that would potentially visit there. So, I mean, your memo here covers the big concerns that I had.
Okay.
I'm concerned about the city being responsible for someone getting hurt, for example, at one of these units.
And
And
I
we need
just-
to do our due diligence.
I just don't know where you'd go with the ordinance, because if you own a house in Clawson now and you're renting it out, it does get inspected, but as far as I know, it's only inspected from the outside. No one goes inside the building to look at it. So I don't know how you could do this because it's commercial, I guess.
It goes back to Commissioner Redmond's point that, yes, this is a commercial use in a
It's a commercial
residential
adventure, so
structure.
then
Yeah.
therefore the inspectors have the right to go in and
Yeah,
inspect.
but again, I'm not going to represent for administration that's like a.
And there's a CFO process, Joe, with that. Is that correct? When you, Joe, Joe, when you go through the process as a commercial use, isn't there a safety and guideline process that is a natural occurrence in a residential or like a CFO that goes along with?
Do we need to pause? It looks
Oh.
like we're offline. I don't know if that's the case or not. I just,
We're
okay,
still- oh.
just want to make sure we're still recording everything.
Thanks.
Is that a natural part of that process, Joe, with a commercial unit?
When a business opens in town, yeah, typically there's a CFO process, and then, for a new home, you'd have that process as well, but.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, any new business, any new home has to get a certificate of occupancy. I mean, that's the law of the land. So
Or a change in use of a business?
any new business, yeah.
So even if the same business decides to open up an Airbnb, they would need a CFO if they didn't already have an Airbnb occupying that building?
I mean, I guess I'm not really following what you mean. Are you saying like a commercial, like a retail store turn into an Airbnb
Or a
overnight?
mixed use, I don't know, a mixed use building. I don't know what this might trigger in the commercial components of our zoning, where there is allowed to be residential units. Is that going to be a requirement? I mean, like, this goes really deep. It would need to have a certain dwelling aspect to it, right?
Ultimately, that's part of the reason that we've been asked to look at zoning for it is, like, where would it be appropriate?
Right, and I think again that the rental ordinance and short-term rental ordinance are two separate things. And Mr. Christer, I think you made a point about the interior inspections. And so the short-term rental ordinance could have its own separate regulations that govern it, when the rental ordinance can have its own, that they don't have to be the same. And then when it comes to process-wise, when the council approved the short-term rental ordinance, they wanted planning to take a look at the zoning aspect of it. Based on conversation, you, as a body, were not comfortable making a determination on the zoning due to questions on the actual short-term rental ordinance language as a whole, which is why this is being presented to you now. And so this memo will then be presented to council based on feedback that you've had, that once all these items are in some capacity addressed by the council in the ordinance, at that time, my belief is that then you'd be able to determine zoning. Would that be correct? I'm getting a couple of nodding heads.
Would we be approving the ordinance changes here, or does that go on to?
No, this is
council?
a code of ordinances. This is not a zoning ordinance, so this is simply a recommendation by the planning commission. The planning commission doesn't approve ordinances.
Simply recommend it and then it goes on.
Correct.
Goes on.
And they can take this recommendation, they can expound on it, take a couple of them, take all of them, or none of them.
Would it be beneficial to have a united meeting? So, I mean, like, if they're going to impose ordinances with potentially with our guidelines, wouldn't it be helpful to just have an open line of communication with council and do a workshop?
I think that could be appropriate to do down the line. I know that you mentioned that there's, yeah, and we've certainly done joint meetings. I think what we like to try and do is have more than one topic in these joint meetings, and so I think we could formulate a couple of different topics we could discuss during this. And that's something we'll talk about and see if we can get scheduled over the next few months, probably after the budget at this point. So we can take this recommendation from you now and present it to council separately, or with your recommendation, present it with council with your recommendation that you wish to discuss it during a workshop between both bodies.
Well, I also don't want to drag this on even longer, but it would seem like I don't want to just play the messenger of back and forth. Oh, but wait, what about this? And they didn't do this component, and this was really important, where it seems like it could be handled with just a conversation, right?
Well, and I think you raise a good point, though. If the decision by the planning commission is to provide this memo to council with the request to schedule a joint meeting, we have that one meeting. Everyone's able to discuss jointly, unanimously, and then at that point, council can address the ordinance language, planning can address the zoning aspect of it, and then we can come to an ordinance that everyone's happy with.
That sounds good. You want to make the motion?
No, I don't. I can't do that.
I mean, but does it have to like wait 3 months, or can it be like a special meeting on a day that, I guess?
It's something that has to be done. I don't think it has any pressing deadline, but.
No, but
sooner
it
the
is
better,
something
yeah.
that's been on our
Radar,
agenda
yeah.
forever.
I just will say that there are a handful of special meetings coming up just with
Oh.
the budget that council has. And so I certainly don't know all of their availability. So I think it'd probably be best to try and schedule something after the first or second week of May. So maybe look at middle to the end of May to have that joint meeting. That way we can also maybe have another topic or two prepared to discuss with the body. That way
Sure.
we can maximize everyone's time.
Yeah,
At their convenience, yeah.
yeah, I'm okay with that. I don't know how everybody else feels, but.
Okay, you don't need to vote on this one.
Or do we have to move to present that?
I mean, that's totally up to you. I think the recommendation would be to
I
send this
thi-
letter on to council with the recommendation that a workshop be scheduled.
I think that's where we stand. Anybody have any problems with that?
No, I just didn't know, there's no public hearing component or public comment component, because there are
Not
folks.
in this, it wouldn't come in front of us. I think it'd come, once it gets to the
I mean,
council.
for tonight, just because I saw.
There are residents in
The
the
council
audience.
has to do, what, 2 readings of an ordinance before it becomes a law?
That's correct.
Well,
So-
are you asking if we want to open it, just in
Yeah, I
case
didn't
there
know
are
if that
members
was
of the public that are
Something that we
here?
wanted to do tonight, or wait till we have I don't know if the workshop's open to the public, or if it's just,
So there are 2 members of the public that haven't talked, right? That you didn't know if they
Yeah.
were here to speak on that.
that was my,
Does anyone in the public have any interest in this subject?
Okay.
No, they don't. Thank you.
I thought it was a familiar face, that's all.
Yeah, her, okay. I mean, is that okay, Chair, if you open it for
Sure.
that?
I'll open up for public if you come to the microphone.
Sounds like a bribe. Hi,
Hi.
Lisa Rogan. Yes, I'm an Airbnb host for 6 years, I think. But I home share, so that's very different.
So you're in the house.
I'm
Yeah.
in the house.
Right.
And I've had no incidents, and all my neighbors are involved, and they all know. But like I probably said 3 or so years ago, I know the difference between good hosts, whether or not they're in the home or not. And a good host has their neighbors enlisted, and they have a phone number, and they say, if anything is ever wrong, here is my number, or here is the person who hosts my home's number. Call us immediately. You know, there's so many, how would I say this? I mean, I'm not prepared for tonight, and it's been a long day, but I would recommend cameras. So if that home is not occupied, you know, it should be cameraed. There should be somebody monitoring it. But I guess I'd like to be part of some committee if I'm ever invited to do so.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Were you able to, because you said you came last minute, were you able to review this letter that was included in the packet? Because
No.
we have some outlined proposed changes to the ordinance, and I didn't know if you
No, I
wanted to
don't
comment
keep
on
an eye on.
burdensome of
You
that.
know,
Okay,
no.
that's fine. I was just
I mean,
curious. That-
somehow I heard a
next time we
murmuring that
can-
this was on the agenda, and
And is your
I-
house registered with the city as a B&B?
no.
She's not legally an Airbnb.
I am legally an Airbnb.
Well, I mean, by ours, because you're a host share, you share your home.
I do share
So
my-
it's not the same.
Well, you feel
essentially.
safe because I'm there.
I do. I don't have any
And luckily,
issues.
I
Yeah.
feel safe. I mean, you know.
But I think that-
Well, I could be robbed, I could be harmed. I mean, I could be.
Right, but I think our attorney made the point before when you were here, if I recall
Long
right,
time.
that you didn't fall under, like, even if it wasn't allowed in a residential area,
It's my home, right.
Right, it's not the same,
It's not a
essentially.
rental, I'm not,
Right. You're not subject to even the,
scooping up a bunch of properties or what have you.
Right.
But I have a lot of insight. I mean, I've cleaned them, I've managed them, I've staged them, I've hosted them. So I'll say, I would love to participate if you'd like any participation at some
Appreciate
point.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in public? Here we go.
Hello, Nate Hare again, 413 Park. I've heard this talked about so many times, and it doesn't seem to ever go anywhere, so progress would be great. It's such a wide-ranging topic, and it came out of nowhere. I don't understand why the city administration is pursuing it. They haven't really been transparent about that, other than to say, we better do this before we can't do this, or before it's too late, and I just never understood what that meant. But I do appreciate that it will have pretty significant effect to residents if there are underregulated, problematic short-term rentals that show up next to everybody's houses. So I think the original topic here was to establish a zone where it would be good to do it and a zone where it would be not good to do it. And if you can't make that decision because of whatever reasons, or you don't understand which areas are good, maybe just select a pilot area to try something out and restrict it to one place that can be sort of, if it is a terrible idea and it backfires and terrible things happen, like it's just one area, not the entire city. It's the only thought I had, but in general, I'm sure you'll know what to do. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no one else in public, I will then close public comment and entertain a motion.
okay, I will make a motion to direct admin to set up a joint workshop and ask city council if they will work with us. I forget how we were wording that. Work with us on
Do we
a,
want to ask them to present this memo to city council and set up
oh, I thought we were amending the memo.
Okay, I didn't understand it that way. I thought that they were going to present the memo. These are some recommendations that we have, and in addition to that, let's have a discussion so we can close out any ordinance updates and then talk about zoning at the same meeting and just kill two birds with one stone at a single joint meeting. I thought that was what Nick
Yeah,
was.
I want to present
I'll
this
second that
memo,
then,
yeah.
that's fine. Was that in the form of a motion? Sure.
I don't even know if we need a motion, but that was,
Yes, we do. We
Looked like a
clarified.
motion,
Yeah,
just for the
yeah.
record.
Yeah.
okay.
So to present this and ask for a joint meeting
Yeah.
with the city council at their earliest convenience, please.
So we can resolve ordinance updates potentially and zoning.
All right, so we can't have co-motion, so who's making this
I'm
motion?
sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
We just,
I believe he's got the
Okay.
motion and you've got the support.
I will take support
one.
on that. I mean, I
Okay.
think we're saying the same thing.
And,
Do you want to read it back to us, Nick?
we've got it.
Okay, all right. I move
I think it should be,
to present this along with a proposal for a joint meeting to city council at their earliest convenience. Is that okay? Is that acceptable? Does anybody want to amend?
do you want,
That's fine.
you want to support him? Okay.
That's fine.
You support me?
Yeah. Support.
Oh, thanks.
Just reverse polls here.
We like to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, roll call on that one, please.
All right. Mr. Cusero,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Colby.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 10 is an ordinance review, screening walls adjacent to residential zoning districts.
Yeah.
This is an item I requested to be put on here.
This is an item we worked on back in the fall, and we kind of shelved it, anticipating that there would be other ordinance amendments that could be packaged with for council, but nothing's arisen, so let's just get it done. is kind of the thought here. So back in the fall, we had just finished reviewing a multifamily project along 14 Mile Road, and the ordinance has a standard that screen walls between PUDs, RM1 and RM2 districts need a 4.5-foot wall versus a 6-foot wall that would typically be required between other uses and single family. And basically the decision at the time was made to take the 4.5-foot walls that are required and raise them to 6 feet like all the other walls. In the 14-mile corridor in particular, you have alternation between multifamily residential and non-residential uses. The non-residential uses all need the 6-foot wall. It's kind of weird to have a 6-foot wall and then all of a sudden a 4.5-foot wall and then go back to 6 feet. So the thought was, let's make it uniform throughout the all the whole city basically. And then there's also some added language at the bottom of that table dealing with existing detached single-family dwelling units that are located in non-R1, R2 districts, but have other uses coming in next to them. And that's what we discussed back in the fall. It's kind of what we settled on as a group. And it just was never scheduled for a hearing because we were waiting for other items to come along, but they never did. So at this point, unless you want to make any more tweaks to it, we just set a hearing and then move it forward.
We never specified materials. The 6-foot wall could be a vinyl fence or a concrete wall.
So what it does is it specifies that it needs to be a masonry wall, and it gives the planning commission the opportunity to waive or modify those provisions and there's some criteria for waiving and
Right,
modifying
we're going to
those
be doing
provisions.
that on his place, obviously, because we're not going to force him to put a wall up.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so
So masonry is the default requirement, but there is ability to waive or modify.
Okay, I have no problem with that. And then it says on here, please note there's a 15-day public notice period required for zoning ordinance amendments. So if we simply pass this on to mayor and council for their approval, then they do the public comment?
Oh, we do the public hearing. So if you want to set a public hearing on this tonight, you'd set it for the first meeting in May. The 14th of May. And then we would have a public hearing then and send it on to council.
May 14th. That'd be my preference. Anyone in?
Are we good? Do you want to make a motion?
Do you,
Yeah.
Do you need a vote and motion on there, so you can just take direction?
Yeah, I think we need a motion.
You have a
We need a
motion to
motion.
set a public hearing, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm on the
Were you
wrong
making
one.
that motion, Josh?
I'll make it, yeah. I move to set a public hearing for May 14th to allow public comment on the proposed zoning ordinance amendment.
Support.
Motion support. Any further conversation? May I have roll call, please?
Standing in your way.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon. Yes. Thank you.
And moving on to agenda item number 11 is other business. Does anyone have any other business?
I actually have other business, if that's okay. I kind of wanted to circle back to some comments that were made earlier about the PUD. I do think that our last meeting was a little bit rocky. We didn't have the opportunity to fully explore the whole PUD ordinance with the developers without being interrupted a few times. I really don't know if everyone understands the importance of a PUD and what PUDs are supposed to do. They're supposed to bring something unique, something special, something that we couldn't have if we just if we didn't allow for a PUD. With that said, I would like to make a motion to rescind our vote last week and direct the admin and the planner to rescind the motion to direct the admin and planner to prepare for council consideration, an ordinance that would, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Rescind the approval and recommendation to the city council on the proposed site plan development for 150 North Main and 36 Lincoln. And maybe somebody will support me and we can discuss.
I would
if not.
support that. I mean, I wasn't able to be here last week, but I
Okay.
watched the meeting on video, and I was shocked by it seemed like bam, 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 it just happened. You know, it's like there wasn't enough discussion. I was surprised.
I'm just going to note that I'm unclear on the legality of what's being proposed. And therefore, I would recommend that we get an opinion on the legality
Sure.
of what's proposed prior to taking that action.
Well, I did look up, I mean, it is Robert's rules. I am following Robert's rules, but,
Yeah, we need to follow the planning enabling, or the zoning enabling act, so I want to make
sure. Is there a way that we can pause bringing it to council so that action's not made on it?
Yeah, so the planned unit development agreement is being drafted right now, and the timeline for that being presented to council isn't for at least 2 meetings, so that's
Okay.
gonna be 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll be able to take the feedback tonight and be able to get an analysis on that. So if that's okay with this body, I think, I don't think right now that there's the ability to make that motion, so I would ask if you just rescind that motion, we'll take that as feedback and we'll get a response for you.
Ask for legal opinion on it and hold till then.
Could make a motion to get a legal opinion on the process for the planning and development, something
Is it
along that
specific
lines.
to rescinding a motion on a PUD? Because we've rescinded motions here before.
I think it's how the ordinance language is written, and obviously Joe and I are not attorneys and don't wanna,
Right, but what language are you speaking of? The PUD ordinance or the?
just the approval of something and then to rescind it after it's approved.
Gotcha. Okay.
Could we request legal for our next meeting be present?
Yeah, I can,
Or do we handle that off?
I think we can communicate and see if we can have them here, and if he's not at that next meeting, we'll certainly make the next meeting, and
I can postpone my, motion until we have, a legal opinion.
Okay.
And, as long as that legal opinion is by the next meeting.
yeah, and again, the won't be presented to council for
But
an
we will,
extended period
we
of
might
time.
want to reconsider something. I would like to leave available time, so
Of course.
are you okay with me amending it in that way?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So what exactly is your motion, just so we can have it captured
Well-
correctly?
I amended my motion. Am I allowed to amend my own motion? Yes.
To
So,
make a motion for a legal opinion?
I mean, it sounds like that she's making a motion to,
I don't know that we.
I think it's a request. We can take these comments
I don't think we really
and,
need a motion. I think we simply have to
I mean-
direct administration to get a legal response to this.
That way
I
it's
don't
not,
think-
it's
I
not
don't-
and we can
formal
certainly
motion.
do that.
Yeah.
you will, thank you. Okay.
Yes.
So you can just remove your motion and we're good to go.
Yes, I
Okay.
can confidently
So
tell you
you
we'll
need to
have,
do what, Nick?
just say,
just let
we
your motion
withdraw
drop.
your motion.
Okay, I will withdraw my motion.
Withdraw support and administration will handle it from here.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you. Anything else on other business?
Was,
Is this the opportunity to speak about the property at 150 Main?
You can if you'd like to. I can,
If I was supposed to do that earlier?
it's kind of,
It wasn't on
it's
the
kind of a hit and
agenda.
miss night tonight, but I'll open up for public for you.
Patrice Hill, I live at 654 Lincoln. We're actually 40-year residents, and we live closer to Rochester than we do to Maine, but there's a lot of concern on our street about the building that's going in where the PNC Bank was. And I just was hoping that tonight maybe there would be some conversation about that, or I would hear some plans for a public hearing on that. I don't know where you are. I'm kind of late to the party on this, I think. But we have concerns about the traffic that will possibly empty onto Lincoln Street. And I'm just wondering if there's a chance to,
And we've debated it as far as we could, and we approved and sent it on to mayor and councils. Like they said earlier, it's going to be quite a while before they see and approve it. And like you heard, we're contesting it. We want a legal opinion if we can change it or not. So it's still up in the air. It's not a solid deal as of
I mean, we're
yet.
not necessarily opposed to the building. We're just, our street is such a thoroughfare of traffic anyway, from downtown to CVS, for example.
But the only way to control the traffic would be to eliminate the building.
Well,
No,
where he's,
there are other options, I would hope. But, possibly there would be a way to enter and exit either, off Main or off Bowers, which is more part of the master plan, and close the Lincoln driveway.
that was a variance that
Right.
was considered, and I would say for now that we, as a body, have voted so far to move it to council, so we're no longer discussing it pending our legal opinion. But there will be opportunities definitely for you to speak in front of council. And I don't know, I would pay attention to the city council's coming up meetings. City council always has a time for on-the-agenda comments and off-the-agenda comments. So even if you're not waiting, you don't have to wait for it to show up there. You can go and speak in front of them during the off, not on the agenda comments. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, you'll get a lot more attention there anyway, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I will close public comment again. And if there's nothing else under other business, I'll ask for a planner's report.
I don't have anything else tonight, just, there will be more master plan stuff coming soon. We're looking at trying to get a workshop on the calendar. But that's it.
And thank you. And then we have a staff report and training opportunities.
Real quick, just to piggyback off Joe's comment on the master plan, we've talked about having potentially a workshop for the planning commission scheduled before a regular planning commission meeting, so say 6 or 6:30, a little more informal, to have where we can sit down at our table, look at some renderings, some drawings of what we've discussed. So, putting our thoughts onto paper. That would probably be held in the community room, and it would likely be before a regular scheduled planning commission meeting. So just try and keep that in mind as we're moving forward. As soon as we identify a date and time for that, we'll let you know. And if we get feedback that, the majority of you aren't available, we'll of course try and find a better time. But just try and keep that in mind as you're looking at your schedule for the next few planning commission meetings.
And Nick, on that, would Joe and the team bring forth like proposed language at that time, or is it still?
Yes.
Big picture, okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
So how long would that meeting ideally be? You said like probably an hour?
Yeah, so if we scheduled the meeting at 6 o'clock, it'd probably go till about 6:15. If it was at 6:30, we'd make sure there's enough time to, everyone can take a break before the regular planning commission meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, depending on the scope of the conversation, we
Right.
can continue it on in the planning commission meeting itself. We'll just have to be a little bit flexible with how the discussion entails.
Okay, thank you. Is that it for you? And
I just wanted to touch on a couple more points. So again, regarding the ethics disclosure form, I believe we've received those documents from 4 of you. The individuals who have not completed that form, there was a hard copy on the desk for you to complete. We would like to have those by the end of, by April 15th. So next Monday, those are due. You can fill those out, scan those, and send them in to us, or drop those off at City Hall, or I can hang out here tonight and collect them if you wanted to fill those out today. Regarding just general development updates, not many things to update you on at this point. Grand River Brewery did get their final certificate of occupancy there. That was completed today. They had a temporary, just for a couple of items in their kitchen they wanted to, or needed to get completed to be in compliance with the fire code. Other than that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
looks good to me. I got no problems.
Nick, what was that, the meeting that, or not the meeting, the workshop that you scheduled? I got an email about that.
Yeah, I'll touch base with both.
Okay, was there 2 of us that were going from the planning commission?
Yes,
Okay.
it is you and Mr. Tinlin, and I was going to communicate with the both of you
Perfect.
separately to coordinate.
Yeah, that
the
was my
schedule.
only
Yep.
question, was I the only one or not? So just
Yep.
curious.
There will
Okay.
be 3 of us there.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next agenda item is legal update, but we have no legal update because we don't have a lawyer this evening. If there's no further comments, to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Support.
And motion support. Can I have roll call, please?
Mr. Colbert? Mr. Kucera?
And yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.